The night she said the words, the lamp was burning low and the wind was testing the walls like it wanted inside. You paid for me, now do it. Her voice didn't tremble. That was what unsettled him most. Ethan Hale stood near the table, hat in his hands, the weight of the room pressing against his ribs. He had paid the saloon owner because she had nowhere else to go. Because the ledger listed her like an object. Because he couldn't walk away from the look in her eyes when the man said her debt would never be finished. He had paid to end something. He hadn't paid to begin anything. Her name was May. She stood near the bed, straight-backed, chin lifted, as if dignity were the last thing no one could take unless she handed it over herself. The bruise at her wrist had faded to yellow. The fear had not. It had simply learned to hide. Ethan swallowed. That's not what the money was for. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something sharp passed through her calm. Every man says that, she replied. Until the door is closed. Silence fell between them, thick and dangerous. Outside, a horse stamped in the cold. Somewhere far off, laughter broke and died. Ethan turned away first. I won't touch you, he said. Not like that, not ever. Her breath caught, just for a moment. Then why am I here? Because the world is cruel, he thought. Because I didn't know what else to do. But he didn't say that. Because you're safe here tonight, he answered. And tomorrow we'll figure out the rest. She studied his back, suspicion warring with exhaustion. Slowly, she lowered herself onto the edge of the bed, hands folded in her lap like she was waiting for judgment. That was how the night passed. With space between them, with questions neither knew how to ask. With the understanding that something irreversible had already happened. By morning, the town would talk. By morning, Ethan Hale would be a man who had paid for a woman. And May would be a woman the town believed was owned. Dawn came pale and unforgiving. The rumors moved faster than the sun. By the time Ethan stepped outside to split wood, eyes were already on him. Measuring. Deciding. The saloon owner nodded once, slow and knowing. A ranch hand spat in the dirt. May stayed inside. She listened to the sounds of a life that was now tangled with hers. The chop of the axe. The creak of the floor. The careful distance in his footsteps when he passed the door. She had survived worse than whispers. She had crossed an ocean on hope and buried a husband under foreign soil. She had learned that survival sometimes meant becoming smaller so the world would not notice you breaking. But this was different. This man had not taken what he was expected to take. That made him dangerous in a new way. When Ethan came inside, he set bread and coffee on the table and stepped back. Eat. We'll talk after. About what? She asked. He hesitated. About choices. That word again. Choice had been taken from her so many times it felt like a lie now, dressed up to look kind. Still, she sat. They ate in silence until she finally spoke. If I leave, they will come for me again. I know. If I stay, she continued, they will think I belong to you. Ethan met her eyes. I know that too. The truth sat between them, heavy and unavoidable. Marriage was suggested by the town preacher before the idea ever reached Ethan's mouth. Said gently. Said like advice. Said like the only way to make the talking stop. A wife was respectable. A bought woman was not. That night, Ethan stared at the ceiling, listening to the wind, and understood that doing the right thing had put him on a path he could no longer step off. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. If I marry you, it won't be a lie to me. I won't trap you. You'll have your name, your space, your say. May looked at him for a long time. And if I say no? She asked. Then I'll still make sure you're safe, he replied. Even if it costs me everything else. Something shifted then. Not relief. Not love. Something steadier. Trust. Taking its first careful breath. I will marry you, she said at last. Not because you paid, but because you did not take. Ethan nodded once, as if accepting a sentence he had already chosen. Neither of them smiled. They stood in the middle of the room, two lives pressed together by circumstance, about to become something neither had planned. And somewhere deep inside the silence, fate leaned closer, listening. The wedding took place without music. No flowers, no laughter, just the preacher's voice steady against the hush of a town that had gathered not to celebrate, but to witness. May wore a plain dress borrowed from a neighbor who never met her eyes. Ethan stood beside her in his work coat, hands rough, jaw set like a man bracing for weather. When the preacher asked if anyone objected, the silence was loud. That silence followed them home. Marriage did not soften the world overnight. It sharpened it. Men watched Ethan differently now, with a mix of envy and judgment. Women measured May with glances that weighed her worth against a story they thought they already knew. Inside the house, nothing changed at first. They kept their distance, slept on opposite sides of the room, spoke when necessary, carefully, as if words were tools that could cut if handled wrong. Ethan worked the ranch harder than ever, sweat and dust becoming a shield. May took the house in small, quiet steps, cleaning, cooking, fixing what she could without being asked. She learned the land the way she learned people, by observing where it broke and where it held. At night, when the lamp dimmed, thoughts grew louder. Ethan wrestled with a fear he didn't name, that he had stolen her future by trying to save her present. That one day she would look at him and see only the bars of a gentler cage. May wrestled with something just as heavy, the slow, unsettling realization that safety could exist without demand. That kindness could be consistent, that a man could share a roof and still wait. Weeks passed, then one evening, a storm came down hard from the hills, sudden and angry. A fence gave way, a calf broke loose. Ethan didn't come back by nightfall. May stood at the window, watching rain blur the world, a tightness growing in her chest she didn't recognize at first. When the door finally opened and Ethan stumbled in, soaked and bleeding from a cut above his brow, she moved before thinking. She took his face in her hands. The room went still. I thought. She stopped herself, breath uneven. Thought I had lost you. Thought the world was taking again. Ethan looked at her like he was seeing something new. Not obligation, not duty, care. From that night on, the space between them changed. Not all at once, not easily, but inch by inch, they began to talk. About small things at first. Weather, work, then deeper ones, loss, shame, the quiet anger of being reduced to a single mistake. May told him about the sea crossing, the hunger, the way her husband's voice sounded the last time he spoke her name. Ethan told her about the gun he buried behind the barn and the man he had been when killing felt like the only language the world understood. One night, months later, May spoke the truth that had been waiting. You didn't buy me, she said softly. You stood between me and a world that thought it could. Ethan swallowed. I was afraid you'd never forgive me for the money. She shook her head. Money was never the wound. Silence was. He reached for her hand then, slow, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. The town noticed the change before they did. The way May walked beside him now, not behind. The way Ethan listened when she spoke. The way laughter, quiet, real, began to find its way into the house. Love did not arrive like a fire. It came like dawn, gradual, certain, and when it finally settled between them, it carried no debt. No command, only choice. The past did not stay buried. It never does. It arrived one afternoon on horseback, wearing dust and memory, carrying a smile Ethan had once trusted and learned too late to fear. The man dismounted slow, eyes already moving over the land, the house, the woman standing in the doorway beside Ethan. Well, he said lightly, like time had been kind. Looks like you finally settled. May felt it before Ethan spoke. The tightening, the way his hand curled, then relaxed, as if he were reminding himself who he was now. Turn around, Ethan said. Ride back the way you came. The man laughed, still giving orders. You always did like to pretend you were better than the rest of us. His gaze slid to May. Didn't know you had a wife. May stepped forward before Ethan could stop her. Her voice was calm. You know now. Something in that steadiness unsettled the stranger. He looked back at Ethan, reassessing. Word is, he said, some debts don't disappear just because a man hangs up his gun. The threat hung there, unspoken but clear. That night, Ethan sat at the table long after the lamp burned low. May watched him, understanding without being told. The world he had outrun had found him again. I won't let it touch you, he said finally. I'll send you away if I have to. May shook her head. I crossed an ocean to survive. I married a man who chose not to own me. I am not leaving because fear knocked on the door. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and saw not the woman he had sheltered, but the partner who had chosen him as fully as he had chosen her. The confrontation came at dawn. It was short, it was brutal, and it ended without a gunshot. Ethan stood his ground, not with violence, but with truth. With witnesses, with the strength of a man who no longer needed to be feared to be respected. The past left the way it came, smaller than it remembered itself. When it was over, Ethan sat on the porch steps, shaking, the weight of what almost happened pressing down hard. May sat beside him and leaned her head against his shoulder. You came home to me, she said. That matters. He turned to her, voice rough. I should have protected you better. She took his hand, placed it over her heart. You did, you are, every day. The years that followed were not perfect. They were real. They worked. They argued. They healed. They built a life where choice was never questioned and silence was never used as a weapon. The town learned, slowly. Respect grew the way it always does, through consistency, not explanation. And one evening, as the sun set gold over the fields, Ethan realized something simple and staggering. He had not gained a wife because he paid for her. He had gained a wife because he learned how to stand beside her without taking anything away. Some stories begin in darkness. Some begin in silence. And some begin with the wrong words spoken in the wrong moment. And still find their way to truth. If this story moved you, if you believe love is strongest when it is chosen freely, then subscribe, like, and share to keep these stories alive.